Hi, I'm Jeffrey Smith, co-director of the film you're about to see. Thank you for joining us for this very special free online global event. And this film may change your life. When you're done watching, please click the link below for a very special announcement.
So at the time that I was doing triathlons and living a healthy lifestyle, I met my husband. He also was very dedicated to healthy living, and we got married and started our family. So we had children and a brand new house, and we both had careers that we loved, and we were both active and physical. And that all came to a screeching halt in August of 2007. I was in my mid-30s when I had sudden onset neuropathy in my legs. I lost the movement or ability to stand on my left leg. So we decided to go ahead and have surgery. And I woke up after that standard procedure with an inability to walk. I had what's called chronic pain syndrome. So I had pain messages running through my neurological system around the clock. There was no way to turn that pain off. I became very dependent on pain management techniques, steroid injections. I think they injected every part of my body, my skull, my neck, my spinal cord. It got so bad I couldn't move my wrists. I had injections in my wrists. And that just really cascaded into a number of chronic diseases: myofascial syndrome, fibromyalgia, IBS, food allergies, chronic pain. Depending on who I went to, there was a new diagnosis. I eventually lost the job that I loved because my prognosis was so poor. And I spent, the majority of my time thinking about what I could do, or what my options were as far as recovery. At the same time that I was receiving my multiple diagnosis, my son was diagnosed with pervasive developmental disorder, which is an autism spectrum disorder. And as a parent, you're sort of, when it's your first child, you don't know where to go. You don't really know what to do with that information. A well-respected neurologist said that he would never speak and that he would never have peer relationships or social experiences, potentially not live on his own, never get married, and that his social anxiety was so severe that he really needed medication to be able to survive in society. All of Stephen's clothes were chewed to bits. He was always doing something, I think, whether he was rocking back and forth or throwing his body in or sucking on his clothes or putting things in his mouth. He would use those kinds of movements or flapping as a way to calm his central nervous system. And if he wasn't doing it, then he was usually shut down. It took him a very long time to speak. So he then starts to gesture and use fluctuations in tone of his voice to articulate what it is that he wants. Stephen required a lot of speech therapy.
When I started working with him and joined his team, he was in second grade. At that time, Stephen was communicating with mostly gestures.
And when you can't control your tongue and move it or pull it back in or pull it forward, you have to teach the child how to do that. And Stephen had to be taught that over and over again. My son Camden had early signs of asthma, so getting chest x-rays to look at how much scar tissue was developing from repeated cases of bronchitis. In fact, we had to rent the nebulizer so often from the pediatrician that she suggested we buy our own, which we did. He was very puffy looking and swollen, but then we thought, well, he's chubby. He's just a chubby baby, and isn't that cute? But in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I don't know that his belly should be that distended and hard-looking and big. He was prone to constipation, which would then lead to mood-related issues and agitation and anger. I felt like he was very hot and cold, happy one minute and then in an anger and rage in the next. You couldn't reason with him. We had to wait for him to calm down so that we could even have a conversation with him. So in Trayson's case, his body was covered in rashes, head to toe, behind the knees, was so inflamed, he was bleeding. My husband is naturally very lean and athletic. He was doing all natural bodybuilding and has a really good build. So we noticed that on one side of his chest, he was developing an enlarged breast tissue. So he went and had a mammogram, and that came back as a benign tumor called gynecomastia in men.
What they recommend is if it bothers you enough, then they recommend surgery to have it taken out, basically. And, you know, I asked the doctor, how does it come? How does it come about? And they really didn't have many answers.
But I had my suspicions that something we were eating every day may have been contributing to the gynecomastia. So what was really happening in our family was that each family member was developing a chronic condition of the body, one at a time, slowly and accumulatively, so that eventually, when I wrote everything down that we were managing, we had 21 chronic diseases in one family. I mean, we were making conscious choices every single day to live a healthy lifestyle, and something went terribly wrong. But we blended in with everybody else because everybody else had the same problems. They were doing the same things. They were in the therapy rooms. I was having conversations with mothers that we could all relate to each other because everybody had children and or themselves that had chronic conditions.
So our son was diagnosed on the autism spectrum when he was 3.
My youngest daughter started having some GI issues.
My daughter was about 8 years old, and she was looking really inflamed and puffy, and she was starting to develop breasts.
I was diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer.
I have had 3 miscarriages.
My first boy, he had an allergy to milk and then to nuts.
And I know that our family is like every other family out there. I know people are doing the same exact thing, that as the symptom comes up, they address that particular symptom. And before you know it, one is piled on top of the other, on top of the other. So we were essentially, at a very young age, even though we were health conscious, we were managing early signs of chronic disease. Around age 2, Trayson ate a peanut, and he had an anaphylactic reaction. And like what any family would do when you have a child with a peanut allergy, you remove all peanuts from the house. And I said, why is it that we're willing to remove foods from the house that we know are life-threatening to an individual that would have an anaphylactic shock, but we're not willing to remove foods that would create chronic disease and a slow death? Because essentially what you're doing is you're still contributing to death, but on a very slow, steady basis. And that's when I said, I will never bring foods in this home that do not contribute to health, that in any way jeopardize anyone's health in this family. And that was the beginning entry point for when I started to look at the food and the body and the physical symptoms. I decided that I would learn as much as I can. So even in a short period of raising a family and trying to reverse my own condition, I spent 1,700 hours studying only nutrition, 100% holistic nutrition. And I learned some of the biochemistry behind autism and how food chemicals break down in the body and the mitochondria and the endocrine system. And that became really interesting, where I started to really learn about specifically what autism can teach us. In fact, autism was my greatest teacher about the human system and its interaction with food.
Oh, try it again. Cool that air. Make that air cool your tongue.
I mean, I can remember, I think he was 5 years old, and I'm trying to teach him how to read. So I'm looking at a word, let's say cat, and I'll say, ah. So repeat after me, ah, and he'll get it. Take him a little while, but he'll get ah. And then I'll go to the T. Okay, so give me the T sound, t, t, t. It'll take him a while, but eventually he'll get it, t. So I'll say ah again, and then t again. Now I'll say, no, let's put them together, act. Couldn't do it. Could not do it. It was the most frustrating thing. And I mean, I would get frustrated. He'd eventually cry, I'd cry. I mean, this went on night after night, we were trying this. And I'm still talking about trying to get the A and the T together. That's why, to see where we are today, I'm in shock, really.
My experience was, for myself and for Stephen, that we went through extensive therapy. Nothing carried over. Let's say I was able to perform a particular isolated exercise. I was contracting my quadricep. Never translated to walking. And in Stephen's case, producing a sound didn't translate to speaking. When we made dietary changes and pulled the foods out that were disrupting the body and damaging the body, the therapies translated to long-term results. So we had already spent years, 2, 3, 4 years, doing therapies without changing our food and didn't get results. We were still going to therapy. When we changed the food, we stayed with therapy, got results, and never went back to therapy. One of the main things to avoid to achieve a healthy status or to remove chronic conditions of the body is to remove GMO foods or genetically modified organisms.
GMOs are genetically modified organisms. They're also called genetically engineered foods. While industry scientists claim that GMOs are just an extension of natural breeding that farmers have been doing for centuries, the dozens of scientists that I've interviewed, the independent scientists, completely disagree. GMOs are the most radical change in our food supply and pose one of the greatest risks to our health. To create a GMO, scientists take genes from one species and artificially force them into the DNA of other species, or they alter genes within the same species. This is not hybridization. That uses the plant's own natural reproductive system. These are artificial techniques done in a laboratory. The process itself causes massive collateral damage in the DNA, which can increase toxins, allergens, new diseases, and nutritional problems in the food we eat. GMO soy, for example, has up to 7 times the amount of an allergen. One type of GMO corn contains a totally new allergen. Another has more than 200 altered proteins and metabolites, including those linked to allergic reactions and cancer. These type of unpredicted changes may help explain why lab animals fed GMOs suffer from a variety of health issues. There's genetically engineered soy, corn, sugar beets, cotton, canola, and alfalfa. These are the 6 main GMOs. There's also papaya from China or Hawaii, as well as some zucchini or yellow squash. A small amount of genetically engineered potatoes and apples just came onto the market. And salmon is being sold in Canada.
When we remove those foods, in essence, you're taking the biggest burden off the body, because if those foods are removed, you've eliminated so much of the dysfunction. Take away what is continually breaking down and contributing to the diseased state, and the body will heal itself.
So many diseases and disorders in the United States have increased since the introduction of GMOs and Roundup in the food supply in the 1990s. Asthma, allergies, autism, ADHD, anxiety, autoimmune disease, Alzheimer's. And that's just the A's.
But the bottom line is I've removed genetically modified food and had kids eat all organic food. No pesticides, no GMOs. And the changes I've seen are remarkable.
So our son was diagnosed on the autism spectrum when he was 3. And then I'd say it was a slow roll introducing non-GMO organic. The more we did, it seemed like the better he got. I mean, it wasn't days, but I would say over weeks, over months, we just started noticing more behavioral changes, I would say, not as much what we would call meltdowns.
Yeah, for Ethan's symptoms, again, the spectrum is huge. So with him, he wasn't speaking.
We noticed over, I'd say, a course of months, improved speech and less anxiety. So we were like, okay, let's give him even more organic, non-GMO food. and he just kept getting better and better. They didn't say, immediately they started saying things like, not quite sure we're seeing the autism as much, and it's like, it's the greatest thing you want to hear. So
I'll never forget, we went to a parent-teachers conference, and we were just praying for semi-good news. And she said, he's in the middle of the class. And I went, of the whole class? He's in the middle? And sorry, that was just overwhelming. and you go from preparing yourself as a parent to, oh my God, what is life going to be like? You wanted to worry about things like, is he going to be good at soccer? Is he going to like chess or whatever? And then you go into, you just want him to be okay and be able to live okay when we leave.
And then our daughter, along the same time, we weren't even thinking about her asthma. Well, that kind of just went away. We started talking about it. You're like, it's gotta be the food.
And you get angry again because you think of all the toxins that are being put. It's not just in the food, it's on the food.
I think the more you look into it, the more it just raises questions, and it raises questions of like, what are we doing? How could we be doing this? Why is a chemical company in charge of the food?
Right.
That would be my big question.
The GMO manufacturers like Monsanto, Bayer, Dow, Syngenta, and DuPont are actually chemical companies. Their main products are chemicals. The primary reason they genetically engineer a crop is to allow that crop to be sprayed with their chemical herbicide. The most widely used is Monsanto's Roundup. Roundup herbicide would normally kill the weeds and the crops, but their genetically engineered plants are designed to be sprayed with Roundup and survive. These crops are called Roundup Ready. Over 80% of all GMO crops worldwide are Monsanto's Roundup Ready varieties.
Nobody told us that our food is being sprayed all the time and that they're changing the makeup of the seeds.
The entire enterprise of GMO amounts to nothing more than making plants tolerant to poisons so we can use a lot of poison.
Roundup's active ingredient is called glyphosate. Glyphosate was originally patented as an industrial cleaner to clean boilers and pipes. As a chelator, it grabs onto the minerals and strips the buildup inside the pipes. When the residue spilled on the ground, it wiped out all the plants. So Monsanto bought glyphosate and patented it as an herbicide.
It takes out metals, and that's not a good thing for all of us. We need to be able to absorb certain minerals into our bodies. And that's compromised when glyphosate is present.
And Stephen was presenting with mineral deficiencies. And so that started to make sense to me. I started to say, well, this seems risky that we would be bringing in a food that could potentially take minerals out of our body and also damage the gut microbiome.
We now understand that human health and even brain health depends on the health of the bacteria that live within us. We call the bacteria and the other organisms the human microbiome.
The cutting edge of medicine right now is the organisms that live from your mouth to your tush, to the other end.
The trillions of bacteria in your body control many aspects of your health, your immunity, your metabolism,
Production of vitamins. It's the first line of defense for detoxification.
your set point for inflammation, for example, are all mediated by your gut bacteria.
They are your buddies. You have to love your microbiome.
They make the very chemistry that rules your brain, the brain chemistry that makes you happy or sad.
When Roundup first came out on the market, we were told that it wouldn't affect human health because humans don't have the shikimate pathway. And that's a pathway that plants have. And that's where Roundup affects plants. We don't have this pathway, but our gut bacteria do. And without our gut bacteria, we can't produce the compounds from certain amino acids to make these other chemicals that we need to run our entire body.
Things like tyrosine and tryptophan. It's tyrosine for dopamine, and tryptophan makes serotonin. Both of them are considered feel-good chemicals. More than 90% of the serotonin in the body is actually manufactured in the gut. So when you unleash a chemical like glyphosate, that damages the gut bacteria, there is hell to pay. There are consequences that we are just beginning to understand, but that are very, very real.
We know what glyphosate does. It's been patented as an antibiotic.
Because I had already been looking into the microbiome, I thought, well, the last thing we want to bring into the body is an antibiotic, particularly on food, because our microbiome or our bacteria is really our #1 defense.
It kills the beneficial gut bacteria, the probiotics we normally pay for, like lactobacillus. It doesn't kill the nasty stuff like pathogenic E. coli, salmonella, and botulism, which can overgrow in our gut.
My middle son, who was about 8 years old at the time, started displaying autism symptoms. His teacher called me and said something is going on with him. We noticed that he was hitting. He actually tried to hit us. He had a red rash around his mouth as well. His grades dropped from A's to D's, and he just had behavioral outbursts. And I thought, something is going on with him. This is not just a phase. So I took him first to our doctor, and he said, I'm going to test for fungus. And I said, why for fungus? And he said, well, because sometimes pathogenic gut bacteria leads to inflammation in the brain, which can lead to behavioral issues. And he tested at very high levels for this fungus, the same fungus which is present in children with autism. Also Clostridia difficile, all kinds of bacteria, and he tested positive for over 19 different food intolerances. He said, your son has leaky gut. And I said, what does that mean? He said, he has holes in his small intestines. My son had holes in his small intestines. Why is this happening? And at the same time of this diagnosis was when we had the glyphosate testing. So my son was the first one tested for glyphosate in his urine. And that is when we discovered that he had 8 times higher of the level of glyphosate in his urine than was found anywhere in Europe. So we eliminated any source of glyphosate, and we went all organic. So within 6 weeks, we tested him again, and the glyphosate levels in his urine were no longer detectable, and his autism symptoms were gone. And they have never come back. It's been over 2 years.
We now can connect the dots very easily. Autism and Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, these are inflammatory diseases of the brain. And guess what? It's the bacteria in the gut that regulate inflammation, and these are the bacteria that are damaged when they are exposed to glyphosate.
I don't believe that every case of autism is triggered by genetically modified foods, but I don't think any child on the planet can recover from autism by consuming genetically modified foods.
Was homework easy for you?
Yeah.
Has it always been easy for you?
It used to be hard, and it used to take me a long time to finish, but it's not that hard anymore.
Why not?
Because I went non-GMO and gluten-free.
And what did that do for you?
It helped me in school and helped me focus more and stuff.
Autism, curable. It takes a lot of work. It depends where they are in the spectrum. But what we do know is children on the spectrum have significant digestive disorder complaints. But when you change their diets, they get significantly better. Many of them, not all, even when you just do that alone.
The overgrowth of these pathogenic bacteria can lead to gastrointestinal disorders, obesity, heart disease, and many other serious health issues.
I mean, it's no mystery we have a huge problem, no pun intended, with obesity and overweight in Western cultures. And patients will tell me, Doctor, I am not eating much at all. I'm on a 1,400 calorie a day diet. I'm on the treadmill for whatever length of time, and I can't seem to lose weight. I have to admit, for many years, I'm not sure I fully believed them, but now I do, as we've now embraced the notion that the gut bacteria, the human microbiome, plays a pivotal role in determining whether you are fat or lean.
Switching to organic, we noticed that we lost weight, which was a nice bonus that we didn't expect.
So majority of my practice members, myself included, have found that it's so much easier to stay at a healthy weight and not worry about it when you change to that organic and non-GMO lifestyle.
At the time, my daughter was about 8 years old, and she was looking really inflamed and puffy, and she was starting to develop breasts, and she had a little pooch in her belly going on. And since we've gone GMO-free, her belly is completely flattened out. It's like that inflammation is totally gone. and she's stopped that accelerated development. You know, she is where I feel like she belongs as an 11-year-old little girl.
Part of the experimental process was the individual removal of certain foods because you're playing detective in essence. You're trying to match up symptoms and conditions with specific foods. And at this point, we already removed soy, dairy, gluten, preservatives, food dyes, and we still had the conditions that we were struggling with. We had improvement, but everybody still had all of the same conditions. So when I looked more specifically at the genetically modified foods and the glyphosate that was still hidden in some of our food, and we removed that, that was when the solution really unfolded.
The Institute for Responsible Technology surveyed more than 3,200 people who reported health improvements after they switched to non-GMO diets. By far, the #1 reported benefit was digestive problems.
So Camden, what I noticed most about him was digestive changes because he had the distended belly when he was very young and was prone to constipation, which would then lead to mood-related issues and agitation and anger. And he just became very quirky and funny and outgoing, and the mood changes shifted. He's now an even keel, steady, easygoing child. His athletic performance, I mean, to think that, you know, when I see pictures of him with a nebulizer on as a child and knowing that he was always so prone to mucus and inflammation and upper respiratory bronchitis and coughing. He's now a real superstar on the tennis court. And soccer and basketball and playing other sports, has no upper respiratory distress, no bronchitis, colds, asthma, ear infections, none of it.
So some may criticize the idea that, well, we want to look at scientific studies and individual patients saying this or that doesn't really mean anything. And I would respond to that in two ways. Number one, the plural of anecdote is data, meaning that each individual anecdote ultimately accumulates to a body of information that we can call data. And number two, that it sure as heck matters to that patient. It sure as heck matters to those parents whose autistic child begins to speak. It matters in a very big way. And as a treating physician, we live for that. So, you know, the notion that these individual cases don't really matter much, for me as a clinician, I have a tough time accepting that information.
After switching to non-GMO diets, people reported significant improvements in more than 20 other health issues, including energy level, weight loss, brain fog, allergies, anxiety, depression, memory, pain, insomnia, hormone problems, gluten sensitivity, diabetes, and skin disorders, to name a few.
Skin disorders, skin conditions are a manifestation of an internal issue. It's not just that you want to put some kind of salve or cream upon the skin and hope for the best. That is treating the smoke, it's ignoring the fire. These are inflammatory conditions.
So Trayson was covered in rashes, head to toe, behind the knees, was so inflamed, he was bleeding. And he had rashes all over his torso, polka dot red rashes, hives, red cheeks, red ears. In fact, I took him to an immunologist, allergist, who was supposedly the best in the field, and his recommendation was to lubricate his skin in the bathtub 3 to 5 times a day and then rub a Vaseline Aquaphor treatment over the wet skin to seal in the moisture and then to keep his hands covered so that he wouldn't scratch it. And I said, well, how is it that I'm supposed to do that with a 2-year-old while I also have 2 other children? And he said, well, that's the only way. You have to keep the skin moist and wet and seal in the moisture. So it was obvious to me that this was not going to work. And it didn't take me long to figure out that what was happening outside the skin was really coming from inside the body. Now, on a non-GMO diet, his system is completely healed. His entire history of eczema is non-existent. No hives, no rashes, no distended belly. He's so much at peace with himself, easy to connect to, than he was when his body was always agitated.
My husband's eating habits were not that great when I met him. He suffered from eczema, he suffered from arthritis, and he suffered from a lot of allergies. So I've worked with him to correct some of those things by introducing him to a non-GMO, 100% organic lifestyle. Right now, he doesn't have any allergies. He has not had an eczema outbreak in 6 years. My husband is a bread lover, so he's addicted to any kind of gluten and any form of bread. So he will occasionally sneak back in a roll or something, but he can immediately feel the difference in terms of sneezing, coughing, and then he'll say, "What is that?" And I say, "Oh, what did you eat?" "Oh, I forgot. I had a sandwich with some wheat." And then it clicks for him.
Wheat is not technically genetically engineered. However, it is often sprayed with Roundup just before harvest to dry it out. It may be that the explosion in gluten sensitivity has its basis in the explosion of Roundup use.
You know, these days we're seeing so many people who are suffering from issues from gluten sensitivity and even other sensitivities. Casein sensitivity, for example, a protein found in cow's milk.
You go to a nurse at a school and she'll say, 30 years ago we had 1 EpiPen on the wall. Now we've got 30. We've got the same enrollment, same amount of kids. Or now we have 60 EpiPens. So clearly kids are having problems today that they didn't have many years ago. So you got to ask yourself, why? Why is this? There's got to be a reason.
What happens is that the gut lining generally prevents certain proteins from getting out and challenging the immune system, leading to allergies and sensitivities. Anything that can threaten the lining of the gut can increase the risk of these food sensitivities. And when you understand that glyphosate, by changing the gut bacteria, whose job it is to maintain the gut lining, will therefore lead to permeability of the gut, leakiness of the gut, or may lead to it.
Their immune system is seeing these foods as foreign invaders, and they're mounting an antibody response to these foods.
Then it really sets up a perfect storm in terms of connecting the dots between genetically modified food leading to more consumption of glyphosate-laden food, challenging the gut bacteria, leading to permeability or leakiness of the gut, then whatever proteins should have been excluded get into the system and lead to these allergic issues, these sensitivity issues that are so prevalent today.
In addition to crops that are engineered to withstand herbicides like Roundup, there are also corn and cotton plants engineered to produce their own toxic insecticide called Bt toxin. The Bt toxin breaks open little holes in the walls of the insect's gut and kills it. Both Bt toxin and Roundup can create leaky gut, permeable gut, holes in the walls of our intestines.
I do testing, and I show the parents that their kids have leaky gut, this intestinal permeability, with food allergies.
So I have 3 boys, and my first boy, he had an allergy to milk and then to nuts, and his nut allergy was extremely frightening. So it's Thanksgiving, and we're sitting at a table surrounded by 18 different family members. Everybody's having a great time. And I look over at my son at the end of the table, and suddenly he looks very, very sick. So I say, "You can go to the back room and lay down." I'm thinking maybe he got the stomach bug. And then a few minutes later, we hear him cry out, and he's covered in welts. His entire body is puffed up like a raspberry with red welts. And so I run and get the EpiPen, and my husband jams it into his leg, and he can't get it out. So I pull it out, and it spurts blood across the room. And my mother-in-law and I are screaming, and we don't even think about waiting for the ambulance. We just run and get in the car. And when I'm in the back seat, my son's eyes start rolling back in his head. And I think he's gonna die. But he holds onto my hand and he looks at me, and his eyes are saying, like, "Mom, please help me." You know, I can see the look in his eyes, and there's nothing I can do. I feel completely helpless. And all I do is pray to God and, thank God that he didn't die that day. But no one should ever have to experience that from food.
When I change kids' diets and treat them however I need to treat them, depending on the kid, I recheck their food antibody testing, and it's markedly improved.
When I removed GMOs, 4 months later, his allergies went from a 19 down to a 0.2. He no longer has life-threatening food allergies.
You know, so often when I see patients, among their various complaints is this thing called brain fog. And they describe it as feeling that they're not all there, that they're one taco short of a combo platter, or however you want to phrase it. But brain fog is a very real issue. The brain is a very highly energy-dependent organ in the body. You know, even though it represents only 5% of the body weight, it is at rest consuming 25% of the body's energy, of the body's calories. And when you compromise the brain's ability to use energy, in other words, you compromise the function of what are called the mitochondria, then people experience brain fog. And glyphosate does that.
Your mitochondria are like little furnaces in each of your cells, and that's really where your energy is made, the energy that just keeps you alive. It's not a process that's passive to stay alive. It's an active process. We've converted stardust to organs, and those organs have all these vital functions. They need energy. So if glyphosate is damaging your mitochondria, you're going to have a good chance of having overall organ dysfunction in many organs of the body.
Consider that it is damaging the brain's energetics, the focal point of such things as Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, autism. So from my perspective as a brain specialist, this is one of the most powerful issues that we deal with in our modern times.
Brain fog and fatigue were also two of the main reasons that I really wanted to find out what was going on with me, because I would be sitting at work and really just staring at the computer and going, I couldn't tell you my name. I felt that dumb.
One of the biggest changes I see with people that go on a non-GMO diet occurs with brain fog. That might occur. They feel more invigorated. They feel more connected. They feel as if they're not just going through life, but they're actually, participating in it.
And when we see people who are really careful all of a sudden in terms of limiting their consumption of non-organic food, therefore they're less likely to be consuming glyphosate, it adds to their ability to regain optimal brain function.
Honestly, within 2 days, that brain fog lifted to a degree where I was almost like a light went on and all of a sudden I felt alive again. And that was really remarkable. That was shocking. I was so excited and amazed really at, wow, it really made that much of a difference.
When we see such dramatic changes in an individual's brain function and reduction of his or her complaints, when they simply make a dietary change that we know will reduce their glyphosate consumption, to me there's very little doubt of the relationship because I see it every day.
At high doses, research shows that Roundup may affect many of our hormones, including the balance of testosterone and estrogen.
Most of us are pretty comfortable with our testosterone estrogen balance where it is. I don't really think we want to ingest a poison that's playing havoc with that, because that's really vital to who we are in the world.
Your hormones run your entire body, whether it's your thyroid hormone that regulates your little battery here at your throat, growth hormone that helps you grow, insulin, which regulates sugar metabolism, cortisol, which is the precursor for almost every other hormone in your body, including your sex hormones.
Monsanto found that glyphosate destroyed the male testes of the rats. That has implications as to the animal's ability to reproduce.
So I am currently trying to get pregnant. I have had 3 miscarriages in the past year and a half or so. With the first 2, they said it's normal, miscarriages are typical, it's nothing to be alarming, probably just bad luck. After the 3rd, and my age, I was 38 at the time that I had the 3rd one, they said we should really start to see if there's anything wrong. So I had the full gamut of tests, and they couldn't find anything. So currently, we're in a state of, let's get pregnant again, and the doctors we'll just see what happens. They don't really have any suggestions.
I had the pleasure of working with Mai, and she came to me because she was struggling with pregnancy. And I asked her to explore more closely the role of nutrition, genetically modified foods, and glyphosate in her diet. And she was willing to do it, which she did.
How are you doing? I'm doing great. I am 22 weeks pregnant, and I feel fantastic.
Are you excited?
Yeah, we're very excited. We're incredibly excited. We waited a long time for this, so. In a typical pregnancy, they say that around 12 weeks is where you're safe and out of the danger zone for a miscarriage. And I think that when we reached that point, and we were
finally able to share that with our friends and family and not worry about having to protect them from disappointing news. We were overjoyed, I guess, is the only word that you can really use.
In 1982, there were 40 fertility clinics in the United States. As of 2015, there are 440. It changes price based on where you go, but on average, in vitro fertilization is going to be about $15,000. Now, of course, you can't put a price on a child. There is no question. You're not going to put a price on a child. However, by changing to organic, by switching to the non-GMO, by starting chiropractic care, taking care of yourself, it's going to cost a fraction of what you would be paying, but that's only in dollars. Think of your health, though. Over the time, if we know that risk of mom getting diagnosed with breast, uterine, ovarian cancer for 15 years after she goes through the drug therapy to get pregnant is over double. We know that they're seeing so many more cancers, hormone-responsible cancers, in the moms who go through fertility treatment. The problem is, the American Journal of Human Genetics also just showed that the babies born to moms that did IVF and used the fertility drugs, the retinoblastomas, the neuroblastomas, all of the solid cancer tumors, were all found much, much higher. So is it really worth it to do whatever you can to get pregnant? Or should we be changing our focus to say, we need to get healthier first? I can see a big shift happen when people start to change that diet, focus on the diet first, and a lot of things start to change and follow. People started coming to me, it's all been word of mouth, and they've said, there's this doctor and she's helping people with fertility. My main goal isn't so much fertility, it's health. And a good byproduct of health is improved fertility. So my focus has never been, let's just get people pregnant. It's let's get them healthy and help them raise a healthier child. So a majority of our couples actually have been to the fertility clinics. They've been trying other things and have been told they're unsuccessful. So of the couples that have come to us, we've had 65 that have babies, 12 that are currently pregnant, and there's not a couple that has used my protocol 100% and not been successful. So Emily is a health coach, and she has been helping people regain their health. So when she came in and was concerned that she had lost her period, that was obviously a concern.
I knew I wanted to be a mother before I got married over 5 years ago now. And I kind of watched my sister go through a journey of in vitro and trying to have children. And we're very close, so I decided during her journey that I wasn't going to take that same approach. I'm going to do this a little more naturally. And my menstrual cycle came back, and then I go, okay, now we can start talking baby. And then about 6 months after that, conceived our child.
As a woman, how did that feel when you couldn't even have your period, much less actually get pregnant for 2 whole years? How was that emotion?
It was horrible. It was horrible. Yeah, emotional. You're not doing the one thing I wanted to do. And I want to have more children, and so I know how important it is to keep doing this. But it's a lifestyle I've adapted. It's natural, and you want it for everyone. And everyone you hear that struggles, you just want to share their story. But I'm so proud of myself for giving my body a chance, because many women, including my sister, they take a different approach, and our bodies aren't meant to go through that. Sorry.
We know that glyphosate is a chelator, an antibiotic, and an endocrine disruptor. Unfortunately, that's not all.
The World Health Organization has now classified glyphosate as a probable human carcinogen. That is earth-shaking.
According to the World Health Organization, glyphosate causes cancer in animals, it causes mutations and damage in human DNA, and where it's sprayed, there are higher levels of cancer in the population.
Things like cancer don't just happen. They happen for a reason. And now we're seeing connections between the mechanisms of cancer and the mechanisms by which glyphosate changes human physiology.
My personal experience actually began 8 years ago when I was diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer. And I wanted to help my body recover from that disease. And I wanted to start by helping my immune system. And so I did a lot of research. I went back to school. I became a nutritionist. And what I did was I changed my diet completely. I thought that I was eating right. I thought I was exercising. But what I didn't know is that a lot of what I was eating contained GMOs, and particularly soy. I had gone on a soy binge in an effort to replace, what I thought were bad products. I was consuming GMO soy like it was candy. Right now, I'm perfect. It's been 8 years since my diagnosis. I compete in triathlons, and I feel great. I attribute the success of my recovery directly to eating an organic diet and staying away from GMO products and eating a living foods diet that includes fresh fruits, vegetables that are 100% organic. And that inspired me to want to bring that knowledge to other people. So a lot of my cancer patients, once they go on a non-GMO diet, report back to me that they are feeling stronger. They have a higher tolerance. If they happen to be going through chemotherapy, they're able to sleep longer and more restful, deeper. They are able to hold food down, and the foods that they're eating are not affecting any kind of gut issues that they might have.
We're here today to support the state of California's adding glyphosate to the Prop 65 listing of chemicals that are known to cause cancer. We're among a team of lawyers that are representing thousands of people who have suffered non-Hodgkin's lymphoma after using Monsanto's Roundup, which contains glyphosate.
My husband, Jack McCall, used Roundup regularly for over 30 years, believing it to be safe. He died a painful death on December 26, 2015, of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Jack's initial symptoms were the same as that of our family dog, Duke, who also died of lymphoma after developing lumps in his neck. He had spent his life following Jack around the farm and was significantly exposed to Roundup. My husband, Jack, was very conscious about the dangers of chemicals, and his misfortune was taking Monsanto's word that Roundup was safe.
My dad was definitely the last person you would think to get cancer. He was an avid surfer, and as a family, we ate out of the garden for pretty much every meal, thinking that that was living a healthy life. Little did we know that we were actually poisoning ourselves. It just feels like an unlawful robbery, and we just want to avoid that from happening to anyone else.
Monsanto asked the Environmental Protection Agency to seal the company's safety studies on glyphosate and not make them public, claiming that they contained trade secrets. However, a scientist named Anthony Samsel obtained the secret documents after repeated requests and a little help from his senator. Samsel is not allowed to show the more than 20,000 pages of secret documents, but he is allowed to report on them.
The Monsanto documents do actually reveal that they found numerous types of cancers in virtually every organ and gland of the animal's body. The experiments that they did clearly showed that glyphosate causes several different types of lung cancer, as well as causing interstitial destruction of the cells of the lungs, which would lead to COPD and asthma-like conditions. So in my particular situation, it's particularly close to home because my wife Jermaine has COPD. And the doctor's prognosis back in 2002, there was nothing they could do for her. She has less than 2 years to live. And I told the pulmonologist, not on my watch. And that's when both of us changed our diets. Well, that was in 2002, and now it's 2015. She's still with us. And her doctors say they don't understand why she's still with us. They attribute it to her diet. They say it's your organic diet that's keeping you alive. Monsanto knew. And that's what makes me angry. They knew, and they lied.
Well, quickly, we want to talk about Roundup. It's been approved in America by the EPA, something that your company manufactures. But many studies have looked at where it's funded or conducted by your company, that this chemical may actually could cause cancer, a chemical that is in this feed. Is there any sort of response to that? I mean, are we in fact poisoning our crops by using this Roundup
Not at all.
chemical?
Farmers depend on this. It's an important tool for growers in the fight against weeds. So every spring, when they plant a crop, the weeds are there. They're there every spring. So they need all the help they can get to combat those weeds. So I feel very good about the safety of the product. It's been studied extensively for more than 40 years.
Monsanto's whole rationale for risking our health with their GMOs and Roundup is to make it easier for farmers to kill weeds. And even this is failing. Superweeds, which have now developed resistance to Roundup, are found on 300 million acres worldwide. Farmers use more and more Roundup to try to kill the superweeds. As a result, herbicide use in the U.S. increased by over 500 million pounds during the first 16 years of GMOs. In response to superweeds, GMO makers are introducing even more GMOs resistant to other toxic herbicides like 2,4-D, which was part of the poisonous Agent Orange used during the Vietnam War. In addition to superweeds, there are now superbugs, which are no longer being killed by the toxic insecticide produced in GMO corn and cotton. In spite of their multi-million-dollar media campaigns claiming that GMOs are necessary to feed the world, the top experts totally disagree. A comprehensive report sponsored by the United Nations and World Bank and written by more than 400 scientists concludes GMOs are definitely not the solution to world hunger. In fact, according to the New York Times investigation, as well as other sources, GMOs don't even increase yields. Monsanto pretended that Roundup was biodegradable until they were found guilty of false advertising. They claimed it was environmentally safe, but the truth is it severely damages soil biology, and it's linked to the massive die-off of monarch butterflies and honeybees. Corporations claim that GMOs and pesticides are safe. However, investigators have shown that they design their studies and manipulate the data to cover up the health dangers. For example, when they feed lab animals GMOs or Roundup, they compare them to control groups that are also fed GMOs and Roundup. And they limit the animal studies to just 90 days. Even then, they have to explain away problems that arise.
The story that is dispensed in public is that there's never been even one documented safety issue with any genetically engineered food. An utter and unconscionable lie that is being propagated as a scientific fact.
There are well-controlled laboratory feeding studies that show clear evidence of harm from multiple types of GMOs, both the Bt toxin crops and the Roundup-ready crops. When independent scientists report problems, a well-organized attack is launched trying to discredit the researchers and their findings. We cannot trust the EPA's evaluation of Roundup herbicide. First of all, they rely on Monsanto to do the testing. Secondly, they only require data on glyphosate, the so-called active ingredient. They ignore Roundup, the whole formulation, which can be over 100 times more toxic. We're not just exposed to Roundup through consuming it in our food. Roundup is sprayed on lawns, golf courses, parks, roadsides, and even schoolyards. Most cotton in the United States is genetically engineered and sprayed with Roundup. So the residues are found on cotton products like bandages and tampons. And they're clearly ignoring both industry and academic research that shows that Roundup has potentially endocrine disruptive effects at doses that are well below that which they're saying is safe to consume. For example, ultra-low doses of Roundup cause non-alcoholic fatty liver disease in rats. 1/4 of Americans suffer from this liver disease, which is directly linked to obesity, diabetes, and heart disease. In the early 1990s, the White House instructed the FDA to promote GMOs. The FDA then hired Michael Taylor, Monsanto's former attorney, to be in charge of policy. The policy that he oversaw claimed no safety tests were needed and no labeling was needed. Michael Taylor, after leaving the FDA, became Monsanto's vice president. In 2009, he returned to the FDA to become the U.S. food czar. Stephen Drucker, a public interest attorney, filed a lawsuit against the FDA. They were forced to turn over 44,000 secret internal memos, and he and others found out that there was fraud.
It's clear that the FDA's own scientific experts concluded that genetically engineered foods entail unique risks and that each one of them has to be carefully tested before it's marketed.
But the FDA scientists were ignored, and their concerns were denied in the official policy.
What we're saying is that we've all been deceived about our food supply. And that is a huge leap of faith for families to wrap around, that we've been fed this toxic food knowingly. That's what we're saying.
But all the technology side is saying, oh, they're fine, just eat them and shut up. And I don't think just eat them and shut up is working.
I feel like we're just being led, like the cows in the farms, to do what we're supposed to do. That's not okay.
When I started learning about the impact that genetically modified foods and chemicals and pesticides and glyphosate were playing in our health and on our family, I felt sad at first. And then I got really mad that I didn't know better, that I didn't ask better questions, or that I was letting my kids down. And then I got really angry at the food business, the industry, the protective agencies that weren't really looking out for me and my family.
In scientific literature, graphs show that as we use more GMO soy and corn in the U.S. or spray more glyphosate on those crops, the number of people suffering from more than 30 health disorders has been rising in parallel. On their own, these graphs are just correlations. They don't absolutely prove a relationship, but consider the context. Lab animals fed GMOs or glyphosate are often afflicted with these or related problems. Many individuals or their physicians report that these conditions improve or disappear after switching to non-GMO or organic diets. Livestock and pets show these type of improvements after a similar change in diet. And science can now explain how the properties and characteristics of GMOs and Roundup could lead to these disorders. Now, one may argue that GMOs, Roundup, and glyphosate are not the only toxins in our environment, and that's certainly true. What is called for is more long-term independent research that's not funded by the very companies that stand to profit from sales. But millions of people and thousands of doctors are not waiting for those tests. They're switching to organic now to protect themselves from GMOs, Roundup, and other secret ingredients in their food.
After the anger came empowerment, because I decided to take us out of the human experiment. And my family, my children's outcome was not going to be somebody else's responsibility. It was going to be my responsibility.
I've had a lot of families very resistant to the idea of changing their diet. The reason being is they can't believe that food that looks so equivalent and tastes so equivalent can be so adversely affecting their health. So we can't tell the difference by the way it looks or by the way it tastes, and organic food is more expensive.
And my answer to that is a couple of points. One, the cheap food really isn't food in the first place, so you're comparing expensive food to inexpensive, cheap, processed, chemically made products. So we've lost touch with what real food costs and what happens from farm to table. Secondly, chronic disease is far more expensive than organic food will ever be.
You know, we'd never bring our kids to the doctor.
Hardly.
We brought, was our daughter at one point, I think for her yearly checkup, and she literally had not been back since her last checkup, and the doctor was like, I haven't seen you all year. And we're like, yeah, we don't get sick. So again, I'm no scientist, but I think the food's working.
I went in for an annual physical with my boys, And the nurse shockingly said, well, you haven't been here in a year. And I said, that's right. And she said, but you have 3 boys in elementary school. And I said, exactly. And she said, well, this is unheard of. She said, you make terrible patients because I can't make any money off of you. Jokingly, but the truth was that we really weren't going in. I can feed my family a meal for under $20 with 100% organic food. I think eating a healthy organic diet is socially inconvenient today. It's not a difficult thing to do, it's just socially inconvenient. And what does that mean? It means being out on the road and stopping to get a quick bite. Things like that have to be thought out in advance. We have snacks, we bring whole fruits and nuts and seeds with us. We always eat before we leave. And birthday parties, we bring our own dessert. And it's really actually kind of funny. The boys now can watch the transformation of the children at the birthday party. It usually takes about 20 minutes after the cake or fruit punch, and then they give me the eyeball like, this is gonna get ugly. And it does. And then for the remainder part of the party, we hear, don't do that, please sit down, get down from there, why are you doing that? So the parents are trying to regulate the behavior of the children who just finished the fruit punch, the lemonade, the blue cake.
When I started eating more organic, when I was pregnant, I felt so much energy. I felt so much better. So then I had my daughter, and there was a time in there that we just kind of had to make things work. And as much as I tried to do organic, we kind of started falling off the wagon and getting a lot more non-organic. I noticed that I was getting a little bit more snippier. I kind of chalked it up that I was exhausted. I noticed the irritableness from my children. And then my youngest daughter started having some GI issues. She wasn't going to the bathroom, or she would scream and she'd walk around holding her belly and she'd just be screaming, and it breaks your heart because it's like, what can we change? What can we do? And then I was like, it's me. It's me. Like, I need to go back to organics. It kind of took like a month, but then, with her eating healthier and eating more of that plant-based organic food, she doesn't cry anymore.
I've had some families where the kids have gotten so much better. It's so profound. I have a kid with a pediatric acute neuropsychiatric disorder called PANDAS. That child, using an extensive combination of dietary changes, food restrictions, and supplementation, got better. However, the family got dietary fatigue. They got tired of constantly monitoring what this kid was eating, how they were shopping. The other siblings didn't have this issue, and they got very lax. When they got lax in their shopping, the organic food, what they were buying, all the stuff that we're talking about, his symptoms all returned. I just got this email. So now I have to figure out, we almost have to start from the beginning. That you can literally unravel a kid back to the baseline where we started. And I see that happen. And it's so frustrating for the family to yet begin again. But I say, we can do it. We've done it once, we can do it again.
It's interesting when somebody goes from a clean diet to a diet that's not really clean anymore. The patient does understand, hey, I was feeling great 2 weeks ago, and now I'm kind of back to, I don't want to get out of bed, I'm tired, my knees hurt.
And I see it time and time again. They'll tell me my fatigue came back, the brain fog. I can't believe how quickly, my joint pains came back when I got off the diet.
They have to want to cheat and see that it makes them sick. And then they're motivated to go back to the good diet because they see the improvement, and then they realize if they slide backwards that they have dramatic changes, and they don't like having their autoimmune disease, so it maintains them on the good diet forever.
I might write a prescription for a medication, though not likely, but on that prescription pad, I often write non-GMO foods, organic foods, let's change your diet. And my plea is that the general audience understands, that the world understands that the science is sound, the science is there, you just have to look at it.
Having this knowledge is so empowering. I feel like I really won the, health lottery. My children don't have to grow up ill. They don't have to grow up with chronic disease. They don't have to grow up fat and immobile.
So the question might be, then how do you avoid glyphosate? And to some degree, you're not going to be able to. I think you could make some significant changes to reduce the exposure. And that is, number one, to try to eat as organically as you possibly can.
I believe we can fix this issue But it's going to take a significant change in our food supply because it's been so contaminated.
Ultimately, it's going to come down to the almighty dollar, and the almighty dollar is going to come from the individual. So even if you think, I'm not making a big difference, you are making a big difference by choosing organic, non-GMO food.
As more and more consumers choose non-GMO foods, GMOs are becoming a marketing liability for food companies. With 57% of surveyed Americans saying they believe GMOs are unsafe, we're seeing a tipping point in which food companies have to eliminate GMOs in order to maintain market share. That's how they were kicked out of Europe. That's how we kicked out genetically engineered bovine growth hormone for most dairies in the United States. Major companies have committed to remove GMOs from some or all of their US product lines. The non-GMO revolution is well underway, and the next phase that's already emerging is the overwhelming demand for organic food.
An organic diet is appropriate for anyone who wants to have a good quality of life. So, I give an organic diet to anybody who just wants a better quality of life. They want to feel that energy that is available to them.
And when you do that, then you can think about optimizing your health by bringing in nutrient-dense organic food, which now the body is able to work with because you don't have inflammatory gut issues, you have proper enzyme function in the gut, you have proper detoxification and absorption, you have conversion, and that's when you see health.
Number one, get out there and support organic. Go to your farmers markets. Make sure you can get boxes of fresh produce. Let your grocery stores know.
We alternate shopping, so we make a good team here. He does most of the cooking, I do the baking.
Most?
All right.
Sorry.
98% of the cooking.
Shopping for healthy foods can be confusing. The easiest way to avoid GMOs and toxic pesticides is to buy food that is labeled organic. The next best choice is non-GMO. But remember, even if it says non-GMO, it could still be sprayed with Roundup and other toxic pesticides. Many crops such as rice, beans, lentils, potatoes, sugarcane, and wheat are sprayed with Roundup right before harvest.
I don't want to eat pesticides. I mean, if you, if you sprayed that with, some chemical, if you just got a bottle of Roundup and took that organic cucumber and sprayed it and handed it to somebody and said, you want to eat this? Yeah, it's GMO-free. No, it's you don't want to eat these pesticides.
Although organic foods are not allowed to intentionally contain GMOs, there's no requirement to test organic foods to see if contamination has occurred. The non-GMO project verification, however, does require testing. So the gold standard is to buy products that are organic and non-GMO project verified.
Eating clean and eating whole food is not burdensome. It doesn't have to be that expensive. It really is, it's a matter of just changing one or two things until we get to the place where we can incorporate a whole clean diet. Like, this did not happen for us overnight.
It wasn't this radical change. We didn't go from Fruit Loops to kale, okay? We went from pizza to pizza and cookies to cookies, vegetables to vegetables, and pancakes to pancakes, except the ingredients were different. So we were eating the same foods with different ingredients. One's genetically modified, one is not. One is giving us disease, the other is not.
We weren't watching GMO versus organic when I was growing up. That wasn't on our radar. So now we understand differently of what is good food, and good food now says it's coming from a local sustainable source. It's not being used with pesticides. There are no GMOs in that food, and it's something that can actually nourish and support you instead of just be in the, it looks pretty, it's big, and we can get a lot of it.
Everyone might have different reactions to it, but I don't think anybody has had a negative reaction to eating organically.
That's a great point. You are smart. You did get smarter after all
Wicked
this.
smart.
Not that you weren't smart before.
And network with other people who are like-minded. It helps.
That's big to find.
There's a couple that we have that are just like us, and we just love going over their house. They love coming to our house.
And you might need to make new friends that do what you do, as opposed to forcing your old friends.
You don't have to get rid of your old
what you're
friends. You
don't have to.
You just don't go over there for Thanksgiving.
As a family, we love to get together with Kathleen and her family. We feel very blessed that we're in each other's lives.
Guys, running plays are in too,
I'm open.
We didn't do a little appetizer thing. Look at this. There really isn't a cork? What kind of wine is that when you don't have a cork?
Oh, man. We've done Thanksgiving now for 2, maybe 3 years.
You taking notes?
So easy.
No, we're coming back here tomorrow.
Who's gonna hear?
The quality of the ingredients is really ultimately what we changed. And that's what led to the results of, resolving our health issues. We had significant changes within 2 to 3 weeks, and each symptom in each individual improved, and it was a very short time relative to how long we suffered. And then within 3 months, even more resolution, and by 6 months, we're really looking at no chronic disease in the family.
I love the fact that we are organic because A, it makes me feel better, I can feel it. And B, I think it tastes better. It fits us, the results are great. There's no reason to doubt it. There's no reason to doubt it.
Almost everybody I talk to says, my doctor said diet has nothing to do with my condition. It has nothing to do with this symptom. And that's wrong. It's false information. I think that medical doctors should say that they don't have any experience in the area of nutrition and therefore can't comment on whether or not diet influences their particular condition. But to say that it has nothing to do with it is a flat-out lie.
When I learned about genetically modified food, initially I thought it wasn't an issue because there was nothing in our literature, our pediatric literature, to suggest that it wasn't safe. There was no studies whatsoever. It was introduced as a safe food.
When you were in medical school, how many hours of training would a physician get in nutrition?
The answer is not enough. I'd probably say 2 to 3 hours of lectures. Myself being guilty, as well as certainly many other practicing physicians, have a hard time in seeing someone's diet as a contributing factor to one's chronic pain. And it's likely is something that we overlook, unfortunately.
This is my disability form that comes in every year. And I was so proud to say to my husband, Stephen, that we'd be filling this out differently this time. It's an exciting time for me.
You no longer feel that you're disabled at this point?
Right, I no longer have the pain that I had because I have a better understanding of the chronic dysfunction in my body, which is the part that I feel I got control over. And my inflammatory response, which was originating in my gut, is where I initiated the healing. So I moved my attention to healing my gastrointestinal tract. And when I did that, the inflammation went down and my body responded.
It's very rare that people are able to return back to work after being disabled for so many years. So I'm proud of you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Hi, good to see you again.
Thank you, you too.
Nice to see you. So we spent a lot of time talking about Stephen's cognitive skills and how he did on the testing a couple of weeks ago. So let's kind of go through what those are and then how he's doing now in terms of some of those skills. He clearly does not meet 3 of the social criteria, and he clearly does not meet any of the 4 repetitive behaviors. So what that means is that he no longer meets criteria for an autism spectrum disorder. So congratulations on all your hard work.
Thank you. It's gonna be so excited.
So when I start to think about this unfolding of when we started to make dietary changes and what that translated to, it's so important to have some context around what those early years looked like. Because as things became easier for him, when I say easier, I mean that we lifted the burden off the body and Stephen was already there. Stephen now is an articulate, lovely, straight-A student with many friends, active, plays sports. He participates in a mainstream classroom without any supports, no speech therapy, no articulation disorder, no physical therapy, no occupational therapy. He does all the things other children do with great ease and elegance and grace, and he is perfect.
So since we've gone non-GMO organic, our son no longer tests on the autism spectrum, and our daughter no longer has asthma.
Right.
So that's like the best news you can possibly have. And we look at it and say, well, you know what? What did we change? Yes, we had a lot of help along the way, but what's a big thing that we changed? We changed their diet.
Yep. And we lost a couple pounds, so that was a bonus.
So many people have benefited from eliminating GMOs and pesticides and switching to an organic diet. After years of struggling with infertility, both Mai and Emily had healthy baby girls. And at Dr. Marcia's clinic, 92 out of 92 couples who followed her protocol and went organic all had healthy babies.
I think it's important to recognize that you can have 5 people, and all of those 5 people in your family, maybe it's 3, maybe it's 4, in our case it was 5. We had 5 people who were all struggling, you know, all unique, all presenting in a very unique way, 21 different conditions and 5 different people, but the same underlying cause. It was the same thing feeding 5 different bodies that was translating to various different diseases. I think that's really important to recognize, that just because something comes into the body that assaults the body, that the translation of that can be so unique to the individual that it becomes very, very difficult for people to say whether something causes something else. What's the relationship? Something I had on Monday gives me symptoms on Wednesday. How do you do that? I'll tell you how to do that. You change the one thing that's going in every one of those bodies, and then you ask yourself the question, what's causing what? Just looking at the basic principles of a genetically modified food, remove that from the equation, and then get your baseline.
If it worked that well for Stephen, from really not being able to communicate at all to where he is today, is just remarkable. And so many more people can benefit from that if they had that information. But, you know, most of those people probably don't know that you can do that much for yourself and for your children, and you really can. You don't have to rely on the outside therapies alone. You can do a lot of good too, and it starts in the kitchen.
I am 100% confident that the removal of genetically modified foods, glyphosate, and pesticides was the fundamental, the foundation for why we all recovered.
Thank you for watching. Remember, at the end of the credits, please click the link below for some important information.
Listen to your body, let it speak the truth. Let your own experience be your living proof. Your body has the wisdom to know just how to heal. When you listen closely, the truth can be revealed. Health is wealth, it's the gift you give yourself. Health is wealth, don't leave it to no one else. Health is wealth, it's the gift we give ourselves. Health is wealth, don't leave it to no one else. It's time to get the toxins out of our food. Maybe it's those chemicals causing that bad mood. There's lots of foods to choose from, but one thing you should know. When it comes to GMOs, just say no, 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 no. Health is wealth, it's the gift you give yourself. Health is wealth, don't leave it to no one else. Health is wealth, it's the gift we give ourselves. Health is wealth, don't leave it to no one else. Call up all your friends and invite them for a feast. When we share the table, there's plenty enough to eat. Let's get back to the kitchen, enjoy a home-cooked meal. You might be surprised at just how good you feel. Health is wealth, it's the gift you give yourself. Health is wealth, don't leave it to no one else. Health is wealth, it's the gift we give ourselves. Health is wealth, don't leave it to no one else. Insisting we need poison on our crops is a lie. We can feed the world better with food that's alive. We can choose organic, there's lots of recipes. Just give me food that's grown on farms with butterflies and bees. Just give me food that's grown on farms.
Let's go organic.
Of course, baby, I love you.
With butterflies and bees.